I think any conversation around, nutrition or training, I think empathy is a good way to approach. It's like, hey, I see you're struggling. Do you want to talk about that? I know you're eating well. I know you've been sleeping. What else do you think might be going on?
Welcome to the Parenting Athletic Kids podcast. My name is Travis Rogers. I'm a mental performance coach and the father of two athletic boys. Through this podcast, I hope to deliver actionable strategies that you can implement to help your son or daughter optimize their personal and athletic growth. I also hope these conversations help you enjoy the ride. If you find this podcast useful, please be sure to like, share, and follow. Today's guest is Michele Pettinger. Michele is an RRCA Level 2 certified running coach, a certified specialist in fitness nutrition, and a certified functional nutrition counselor. Michele has recently written a book, The Young Runner's Guide to Nutrition. And in this podcast, Michele shares her insights into how parents can help their young athlete develop a plan to optimize their nutrition. Here we go. Michele, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. We're going to get outside of the box a little bit with this one, parents. So I'm super excited to welcome Michele to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Travis. Nice to meet you. And thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
A pleasure, as am I. And we were talking beforehand a little bit, and we're going to get into the facts about nutrition, why it's so important. That's the big thing that Michele's here for, but we might drag her down a path into, she did raise a daughter who was athletic, soccer and running, right? So we'll see if we get her into that too. We'll see where this takes us. But Michele, if you would, just tell us a little bit about you, your background, how you got into this, what all that looks like.
Sure. Well, it started young. I grew up, and I started running when I was 12. My dad was the high school track and cross country coach. My older brother ran. My uncle was a marathoner. So I grew up with running. And I would say that I didn't fully understand at the time how all of those experiences were molding and shaping me. Now as an adult, I look back and see how the rhythms that I learned through sport as a child, I apply to my everyday life now. So that was high school. College, I didn't run in college, recreationally to stay in shape. I went to school. I did my undergrad in Ohio at a small university, a degree in communications, master's at Baylor again in communications. And so my first gig out of college actually was working for a local newspaper. But then I transitioned into a career in technical writing. And at that time, 98, I ran my first marathon. And that started it all, really. It started when I was young, but, marathoning, I just fell in love with it. And personally have continued to grow in running as a sport. I run ultra marathons now. And, but anyway, so technical writing, and then I moved we moved up to Seattle, and my technical writing work was kind of dying down. My daughter had just turned 3. I'd been working from home. I wanted to continue to be able to do that. And I thought, what do I really want to do? And I was kind of loosely coaching friends at the time. And I thought, I think this is what I want to do. I want to pursue coaching. And so, went through the certification process to become a certified running coach. And that started it all in 2009. And then it wasn't too long that I was run coaching that I realized that the nutrition piece was just as important, and started my studies to become certified to coach nutrition also.
Well, quite the journey. I have to take you back to you said a couple cool things, the experiences, and you used the term the rhythms of run you like use all the time now. Tell me about that. What is that? Sounds like super cool.
Well, I think that growing up, I'd go to practices at after school and watch my dad coach. Saturday mornings I went to the cross country course and watched him set up the finishing suit, the finishing shoot, and I think I often say that if, like, when I sit down to program for my athletes, I do my programming first. I work with a coach, but I kind of look at my schedule and make sure everything's in order before I jump into my athlete schedule. And that's because I feel like if everything is right in um my athletic pursuits, everything else in life kind of falls into place. So
Awesome.
if I'm feeling not connected or scattered there, then other things in life feel that way.
So that's your kind of happy place. That's your calming, centering place. I feel the same way. So we're kindred experience in that. I this morning I was like, podcast, this, that, and the other. I got to go get a workout in before I start this, because that'll free up my mind and my body and the rest of the day. So
right.
Cool,
Right.
really cool. And so you feel like you learn that through, in reflection now, the things you do, you learn that through youth sports, going through that kind of process and watching your dad and all that kind of stuff.
I definitely believe that plays a role for sure. And I think that because I've been in the sport for 40 plus years now, that's one of the reasons why, there are a few things that led me to focusing on nutrition for the young runner. But one of the things is that I wish I'd known when I was 15 that I was going to have this longevity in the sport, and what I maybe could have done different, or maybe not anything different, but just been aware of what I was doing at that age was going to affect my adult health and my longevity in the sport.
Cool. Really cool. What was it before we get into the nutrition stuff? A bunch of stuff popped in my head. How was the, having your dad as the coach, brother that ran, uncle, how was that for you in that youth sports experience? I think it's changed a lot from what it was 40 or 35 or however long ago to this day, but was it great? Was there, talk us through that if you don't mind, like, what was that like?
Oh, it was great. I looked up to all of them, and my dad was the coach. He was also still running, and we grew up in the Midwest, and we'd have those harsh winters, and he would go to the YMCA, who had a banked, they had a banked track that was, I don't even know how long, and he would just go down there and run a gazillion laps. Like, he'd run a half marathon in the indoor banked track. So
that sounds awful.
I grew up observing that. And then my brother was a little bit older, but really enjoyed track. And it was kind of, the track team, even when I was younger, I think I liked my dad's runners doting on me a bit as the the little sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then my uncle, he didn't start running marathons till later in life, but just, so yeah, it was just fun, following his journey.
Okay. So it's just kind of a family thing, and it was fun, and we did it together, and we got to support each other, and really cool. How about, I'm going to drag you down this road before we get into nutrition.
Okay.
Having a daughter that was athletic, did you coach her in the track stuff, or was it just mom in that? If you walk us through like that process a little bit.
Sure. My daughter grew up playing club soccer. That was her primary sport until just before the pandemic. So 2019, early 2020. I did not coach soccer. We just, were the cheerleaders on the side of the field. And then she came to us. This would have been her going into her sophomore year of high school. And she was like, I'm not having fun anymore. I'm not enjoying this. And I want to see if I can, pursue running, and inside I'm like, I not to get too excited because we didn't push running on her. We, every once in a while jump into the family 5K around the holidays. So it was equally kind of, I was excited that she wanted to pursue running, but then also, I think even more so for my husband, it was challenging to, like, we spent all these years and time, and there's financial commitment to raise junior in this other sport. So it was it took us a while to adapt to kind of letting go of that. And but it was her choice, and she made that decision for herself, and we wanted to support that. And so she didn't really, because of the pandemic, she didn't really get a full year of running until her senior year. And she thought, and so actually I'm going to touch on this because it kind of brings me back to nutrition, is that those years when she started running and she was schooling at home, we had more time at home together as a family. I was actually able to see the rhythms she was in terms of what she was eating before practice, what she wanted when she got home from practice for recovery, and the timing of that. And I had already been thinking about a book with regard to nutrition, but it was, I had that light bulb moment when that senior year of high school was, this is the population I want to start with. I want to help these young athletes understand why they need to fuel the way they need to, understand what's going on with their physiology, and then also show them how to do that. So, but back to my daughter, she then, she chose her college, and it wasn't until after she was accepted to the college, she came up to me and said, do you think I should maybe reach out to the coach? Do you think maybe I could run? And so why not? Go for it. And so then, very shortly later, she had a spot on the team. And so she's in her junior year running D2 cross country and track. And I'll say one more thing about that. In high school, when I was advising her on nutrition around her sports, I felt like sometimes she took it to heart, sometimes she didn't. Is she listening? Is she not listening? But they are listening. They're watching and they're listening. And now she's in her early 20s, and I'm hearing her, she'll call me for a recipe, or she'll say, okay, this is what I'm having before my race, and this is what time I'm going to have it. And it's like, oh yeah, she was paying attention.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Like I'm just thinking about my boys, and I'm sure every parent on here right now is thinking about that 16 to 17-year-old range, right? Where you're just like, hello, like this is good advice. And you're unsure if they're hearing it or not. But my oldest son is now a senior in college, and same thing. Like he'll call and we'll talk about things that we were bringing up when he was 16, 17. So that's really cool. That's a great story.
Yeah.
So let's get into the nutrition aspect of it. Tell us wherever you want to start with it. The importance, I don't know where you're the pro here. So wherever you want to take it.
Well, I think that I want to start with just understanding what's going on in the adolescent body, their physiology. And I think it's important to note that it's unique to everyone, right? The metabolism of one person is going to be different from the other. But there are some guiding principles that I think young athletes can use as guidelines. But I think the primary thing that we need to focus on is that they're growing and developing, and that growth and development needs to be supported first. So you have them growing and developing, we're looking at bone health, muscle development, brain and cognitive development, hormones. Hormones are really kind of they're controlling all of that. If the hormones aren't balanced, it's going to impact your bones, your muscles, your brain. And so we have this growth and development happening. And then we have our young athletes in sometimes even more sport, more than one sport and extracurricular activities and going to school. So their energy needs are great. So it's understanding that they probably are needing to take in more energy than we think. And because if they're going to school, they're in their sport, they're in their other extracurricular activities, and they're not taking in enough energy, that's where we get into low energy availability and can go down a road of them becoming susceptible to injury, stress fractures, and there's a lot more I can say there. I'm not sure if you have any questions about what I said so far, if we want to spend more time there, and then we could get.
So yeah, I mean, we can go wherever you want, but one question, or comment, like in my mental performance work, there's two things that I hone in on before we start diving in to the actual on the field mental performance work. Number one, 1A, however you want to do this, sleep. And number two, nutrition. So parents out there, we know that obviously their athletic performance will suffer if sleep and nutrition aren't good. But what we don't think of as often is how the mental performance will suffer. So we ask all these things, a certain level of focus, a certain level of mental energy, a certain level of resilience, focusing on this, that, the other thing. And if they don't have proper sleep and nutrition, it is super hard to ask those things of an athlete. So I love the fact that Michelle's on here to walk us through this and just accentuate the importance of this. If your athlete isn't on point, or you're not at least helping them to try to be on point with all that's just a domino effect, right? So I just wanted to add that. Any thoughts on that as I'm spitballing that?
Right. It cascades, right? And let's just talk about bone health for a moment. I like to look at things as building blocks, right? There's kind of the macro building blocks of we're building a foundation now that is going to take them into adulthood. And then there's the micro building blocks, what they're doing day to day. And I'll use bone health as an example. Bone health is really a big deal. And I not only want a young athlete to understand why bone health when they're an adolescent is important, but what are the nutrients that support bone health? And then what foods are they going to find those nutrients in? And then practical application of here's a recipe that has all those nutrients.
Love it.
So I think, focusing, and I could go down that road later, but just like, and food first, right? Just focusing on getting all of that energy, all of that caloric intake from whole foods.
Really cool. So just make sure I got this straight. So macro building blocks, kind of the long term into adulthood, micro day to day, more sport specific, gearing up for today's activities, kind of a thing. Is that right?
Right. Like you're the young athlete, the parent, the coach, understanding that what that athlete takes in for breakfast, right? That you want complex carbohydrates and proteins and fats, because that's setting them up for their afternoon practice. Mid-morning snack, it's tiding them over. It's keeping them focused in the classroom till they get to lunch. And then lunch is like, you have to think of that as like, that's your pre-workout fuel, right? And then making them aware, okay, when I get to practice in the afternoon, how long has it been since I ate? Has it been more than 4 hours? I probably need to top off my glycogen stores. I need to take in a little snack, but I know that can't be a big meal because my body, it needs to be simple carbohydrates. It needs to be something easy to digest so that I can execute the workout. And then depending on the sport, there's the intra workout fuel, right? Are you out there for a few hours at a time? You don't want to be depleting yourself over 3 hours, because then it's just going to be that much harder to recover. So helping them understand those little building blocks, it's all, each meal or snack is building off the other, and you're doing it so you can go into the next day and do it again.
That was really, really awesome. Is there like manageable, how would you say parents best help their son or daughter manage this? Is it thinking through the day? I'm just trying to think as you go through that, like I have a pretty good grasp on that, but I have kind of a background in this and I'm able to think about those different times you just talked about. I think it's probably, maybe not, but probably a little harder for parents to understand, 2 hours before, at lunchtime, when they're going to go take the field after school at 3:00. Do you have any like real boom, 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 here's what you should think about, here's what you need to look at in those time frames? And obviously practices vary and games vary, but how would you set somebody up with this? Just super straightforward. Here's what you should look at.
Okay, that's loaded.
Well, we got whatever time we need. We got all day.
Okay. So, I think so. Something I've heard you talk about before is autonomy, and I think that's the other thing I want the young athlete to have is autonomy over their nutrition. So, how a parent can help the runner is, I think, involving them and working on it together. So maybe looking at that, like for the parent, maybe it's like, okay, I understand that my kid needs complex carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat for breakfast. What does that look like? Sitting down with the young athlete and say, okay, what foods do you like? What foods do you not like? Like, what breakfast can we make up that is something you're going to like and something you can grab as you're running out the door? And then on top of that, it's, hey, let's do this together. Let's make our shopping list. Let's go to the grocery store. I'm making this egg muffin. Do you want to chop the vegetables or do you want to whisk the eggs? And getting them involved in the process. So because parents they're working out of the home, they're working in the home, they're driving carpool, they're doing their own sport. Their needs are different than their kids nutrition wise. So the mind can go spinning. And I'm going to segue here for just a minute. When my daughter was in sport, I grew up with, I had 3 squares a day and dinner was on the table at 5 every night. And then I'm raising my child and the schedule doesn't look anything like that. Like I might just be starting an hour and a half carpool at 5. And I had a lot of guilt around that, so that's one thing I'd say for parents is like, you have to have grace for yourself. You're doing the best you can. But I mean, there are things that other tips I'll give maybe to support the parent, but it might not look the way it looked for you, but you can find the best way for your unique family situation. I mean, you might have 4 kids in 4 different sports, and but I believe there's a way, and that family meal at 5, it doesn't need to be at 5 every night, right? Maybe you have a special brunch on the weekend. Maybe your kids love breakfast and that's a time for you to connect.
Really cool. So that's all that's really great. If we're trying to consider the macro and the micro, and maybe this is too broad, like most of my questions have been so far, but you're honing in on it and killing it. So I'll just keep plugging away here. Do as parents, we try to think about both things with each meal, like is this meal or this snack providing a good long foundation, bone health, muscle growth, brain growth, and is it also providing what they need for today's sport, or are those two things separate? Your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't necessarily say they're separate. But I think it's important to say, like, you don't have to get it all right all the time. If the conversation we're having and the parents listening and they've never thought of things in this way and they're thinking, well, where do I start? Right. And my suggestion is to start small, right? Say this week, I'm going to make a breakfast that's going to have everything or I'm going to do it with my young athlete. We're going to make something that's going to set them up for their day. We're going to start there. And then we can slowly build on that. It's, and also I think it's that as you're learning some of these principles, it's like, you don't want it to become something that your kid pushes against or becomes overwhelming for them, or makes them feel like they need to get it right all the time, because teenagers are going to be teenagers. I mean, they're going to go out, for pizza with their friends. They're going to grab burgers and, all those things are, that's good. That's fine. Right. I don't, there shouldn't be any restriction around those things. You've probably heard the 80-20 rule. I think that might, apply here. You're doing the best you can 8% of the time, and 20%, maybe you're not right on point, but you're your intention is there, and you're doing the best you can.
Really good. And that's really good. If you were to try to simplify this, so I love that. Like, great. Let's start with breakfast. Let's make that the foundation. Is there any other really, what would be like the next most important meal? Or, with working out, we talk about getting that pre-workout and the post-workout, and what those, we can go as deep in this as you want to, or stay a little bit more general, or both. Any other times, like, you would say, like, this is really an important, for a young athlete, this is important time / meal / snack for, or maybe there's 3 of them: pre-workout, post. Any thoughts on that?
Um, that's a good question. I think about lunch for the young athlete, because that's their intake 3 to 4 hours before practice, and depending on what it is, and how you and your metabolism, it's like it could be too heavy or it could be too light. And I know when my daughter was in high school, it felt like she had like 15 minutes to eat. Maybe it was longer than that, but what do you have access to, right? So I think, but I think the lunch is really important. And then I think that, the balanced dinner within 2 hours of practice, again, with your complex carb, protein, fat, helps with recovery, muscle repair, and it's going to help them also get a good night's sleep. Because as you touched on, sleep is the other pillar, right?
I always found lunch when my kids were in high school, like, that was hard. Whether it was the selection that they had at school, or having to pack the lunch in the morning, and them taking it, and kind of it was just a hard process. But I always felt, as you did, that breakfast and that lunch kind of set them up for how they're going to do. Do you think it's good? I was just thinking about when you were saying that, like, as parents, it's a good thing to pay attention to, talk to your young athlete about, how are you feeling at practice? How is your energy? Like, it seems to me that we're not with them all day, nor do we want to be, and be standing over them the whole time. But being aware of that, watching them in games, and seeing if their energy stays high, I think that's something that goes missed quite easily. We're worried about all the other things, of how many points they're scoring, how fast they're running, and all these things. But maybe that's a really good, like, foundational place. Like, let me just check in every time, ask them how they felt energy wise, and if they're even more self-aware, how did they feel mentally? Like, I know my kids wrestled. If their nutrition wasn't on point, it physically and mentally, it was a train wreck. And they were aware enough of what they were supposed to be doing mentally in wrestling to be aware of that. Now, that's probably not every kid, especially at, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, but your thoughts on that? Is that a kind of a good place to start, and then work off that and make some adjustments?
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, that can be, something that the parent and the athlete both work on together. The parent can have an awareness of their energy levels, during a practice, or a game. And then also just, inquire, like, how did you feel today? And then if you're working on nutrition together, I think journaling can be a great component, and can really help an athlete connect with what's working and not working for them. writing down, this was my pregame, lunch. I felt great. Or the opposite, I didn't feel well for breakfast. I felt it in my game. I was sluggish, and helping them make that connection between the type of foods they ate and how they performed. And I think journaling can be a great way to do that.
That's a great idea. Love that. One other tool that I'll ask athletes to use is what I call a body scan, parents. So before practice, they just kind of be still for 5 seconds and become aware of how their energy is and where they're at mentally. How do I feel today? A 10 being I feel great. I mean, you can even number scale it and then throw it into the journal. I was a 4, and then you can kind of backtrack. What was lunch? What was breakfast? So we'll use this body scan before practices, before games to check in with that. I think otherwise, if we don't have the intention of doing that, like we just go to the next thing. Coach is telling us to go warm up. We got to do butt kickers or whatever it might be. It
Right.
can fly right past that, and not realize until it's too late, or not even think about it. Really, how was I feeling? Was I in a good place? So
Right. I love that.
awesome.
Yeah. I think combining those two could be really powerful.
100%. I agree. I never thought about, and it'd be really simple, right? They just have a piece of paper in their back pocket. What did I have for lunch today? Or again, starting practice was great. What did I have for lunch today? Yeah. And then try not to, we could get into all the tying the results to the nutrition. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here, right? It's just a feel. How's my energy? How's my mental clarity? Again, if they have awareness of that.
Right. And I think it's, if it can keep their interest in that, it's not just affecting their overall health and well-being now, but it is affecting their overall health and well-being into adulthood. And it was it a Tim Unroe?
Mm-hmm.
I really loved what he said about, we're coaching future accountants and lawyers, and the majority of young athletes, maybe they're going to go on to D3, D2, D1 schools, may or may not become elite, but a sport like, I'm going to talk about running for just a moment, sure, because that's what I know.
You've been holding back for 35 minutes, so
a sport like running, can, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, I'm in my 50s and I'm running races. I wasn't thinking about that when I was 15, but I want 15-year-olds to know that this is a sport that can take you through life, and how you're developing your body now is going to impact what you can do in the future. And I don't think it might be easy for me to say, but I don't necessarily think it's an easy concept for all young athletes to connect with. They're thinking about, am I going to go to the dance Friday night?
Yeah.
Are my parents going to let me go out on Sunday? They're
not imagining being 50 years old and still running around Seattle area. No. But I also think, so that's awesome. But I also think some people become disconnected about the importance of nutrition and how nutrition affects, and I'm talking about as we get older here, because I was a personal trainer for a long time, and I found that people that were athletes and paying attention to this stuff in younger years had a way better grasp on how nutrition affects their daily lives, right? People that weren't athletic or not focused on these things don't correlate those two things as well. And it's hard to get them back to that. A lot of the long-term development we have comes at a young age, right? I'm sure there's some stat that I'm missing on that. Like the subconscious mind has taken on a lot of stuff at 12 to 22 years old. So if we're helping them, just talking about it, like this will be great for you. Again, they're not going to latch on to when they're 50 years old, but they're learning that how I sleep and how I eat affects everything I do throughout the day, whether it's in sports or business or whatever. So I think not beating that home, parents, because that'll be a train wreck also, but and maybe not even talking about it, but just trying to implement those good, healthy lifestyle things and them correlating how they're doing in the classroom and on the field with that is super powerful down the road.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's not just about the sport and the performance.
And we always talk about, so I do podcasts with another mental performance coach. If they're kind of high achieving athletes, like want to be really good, that's okay to say it is for performance too. Like, not shying away from that if that's what they're really into, because this will aid your performance. Saying that is fine too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Is there like age range specific things that you would recommend just dialing up if we're trying to kind of fine tune nutrition stuff from, I don't know what the age, 5 to 10 years old, 10 to 15? Is there any kind of age specific considerations that you would detail?
I think that, as soon as, I would say that kind of that middle school age when, they are, they're at that age where they're doing more things for themselves. I would say definitely you want to start getting them involved in the nutrition choices at that age.
So that's starting to create the autonomy that you were talking about earlier.
Right.
What about like specific nutritional needs? Is protein become more important in that, puberty kind of thing? Or is it if we're just setting them up, carbs, protein, fat, breakfast, whatever?
Right. Carbohydrates, number one for growing and developing. If I were to give it a percentage, I'd say probably like 65% carbohydrate as the focus, and then 15 to 20 protein, and then the rest in healthy fats. But and this is where I think if you have an athlete that is really focused on performance, there are tools where you can help them dial in specifics to them. I know the specifics because running is my primary sport. I know the specific calculations for a young runner that's going to look different depending on your sport. But there are ways to, do calculations and look at, based on how many pounds, kilograms you are. Yeah, I need, you could be needing up to 4,000, 5,000 calories a day. And I don't think most people, I don't want to assume. I think that people might, not be aware that that amount of energy is needed.
Where would you, if like a parent had a football player, whatever sport it is, and was curious about their needs, their caloric needs, and that kind of percentage breakdown, is that something you can just Google, or is searching out a nutrition specialist? Any thoughts on how they could do that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like looking for a registered sports dietitian, that's one route that they could go. There's also the if I'm looking for a runner, I always like to look at, well, what does the science currently say? And the science says this is how many, a range, usually it's a grams per kilograms of carbohydrate that a runner needs. And I mean, you can find those, and it's probably out there for, football players or baseball players or wrestlers, softball players, volleyball players too, because I think that some of these basic principles that we've been talking about apply to all those sports, but in order to fine tune around the workouts, it's going to look different for those different sports.
Yeah. Awesome. One more thing and then we'll start wrapping it up, see if you got anything else. Supplement stuff. So you've talked about, the importance of it being the whole foods and starting with that. And again, I'm sure what the runner supplements are different than what a football player supplementation might look like post weightlifting sessions or whatever. But is there just basic suggestions you have based around supplements?
So my basic suggestions, and this might not be popular, but that is, and it's because there's not really enough science around supplement use and the adolescent age. But that a doctor or a registered sports dietitian should be consulted if you feel like you're not getting the nutrients that you need from your foods. I do recommend talking with a medical professional to make sure that it's fine-tuned to what you need. There's, creatine is a popular one. It's very well researched. But even that, I don't believe is recommended for anyone under the age of 18. So in that case, it's helping the young athlete understand where they can get creatine from real food. To say that it's not a supplement that they need, but I think that I just encourage them to talk with a professional before it's decided that's something that they need.
Really good. I always suggested to athletes, and my boys heard all the creatine stuff at 14, 15, and some pre-workout drinks and all these things, and tried to get them to understand the importance, the value of fine-tuning your whole food stuff, your real foods. Yeah, and then I said, if you feel like you're doing things really well and your energy isn't where you think it could be, or you're not recovering well, or you're not sleeping well, or the next day at school your energy's way down, then we can talk about that. But 99 times out of 100, right, it came back to, I skipped lunch. Or at lunch I had pizza when I know I should have had a salad and some chicken, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You're going to find parents, I think, that's just super common. And the kids are, unfortunately, I think, kind of looking for the quick fix.
Uh-huh.
And for that, I think for that macro, that could be fine one day, right? But generally that turns into, now I'm taking a pre-workout supplement every day because I'm not getting good sleep, because I'm eating too much carbs right before bed, or whatever it might be.
Right.
So,
and that's where that cascading effect comes in. Right. And this could probably be a whole other podcast, but I feel like I need to mention it.
We'll have you back.
Is that, say nutrition is on point, sleep is on point, but the athlete is still struggling, right? That's when I think, and this is really where coaches can come into play, is the athlete overtrained? And I think it's another thing to be aware of as an adolescent is are they overtrained? Like, is something out of balance with what's being asked of the athlete? And I think that comes also into play with, like, I mean, as a coach, as coaches, we can get really excited about our athletes, right? Whether it's raw talent or it's the athlete that is just willing to just work as hard as they possibly can. And we very easily get invested and excited about their potential. But it's needing to have that reminder that we're coaching this whole person, and just because they can do something maybe doesn't mean they should do something.
Good. That's really good. Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for sharing that. And that could certainly be a full podcast. How can parents be aware of that, more aware of that? I mean, I think the basics are like just asking them again, or having them journal how their energy was, and if it feels great and great and great and great, and then all of a sudden we have 3 or 4 days where it's not, that would probably be a sign that we need to back off, check in with the nutrition and the sleep, and then maybe we need a couple of days of rest.
Right.
Your thoughts on other ways parents can be aware of that, or help their son or daughter be aware of that?
A conversation, and that can be just, and I think any conversation around, nutrition or training, I think empathy is a good way to approach. It's like, hey, I see you're struggling. Do you want to talk about that? I know you're eating well. I know you've been sleeping. What else do you think might be going on?
Yeah, I think that needs to, I can just speak from experience. That should be a quicker question than comes up than it usually does. We usually go to a dozen other things. You're not focused. You're not putting in the effort. You're whatever. And that should probably be in the top 5. Let me check in with this. Like, let's look at the last few days, few weeks, few months. When was the last time you had a day off? When was the last time you went fishing instead of running, or or whatever it was? So that's awesome. Appreciate that. That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think that especially when young athletes are in more than one sport, and one sport, leads into the other, and are they actually? I mean, most sports and even at the high school level now, they're year round, right? So, are they having an off season?
Yeah, that's super. That's, and it's not just physical; it's mental. It might be mental. It might be mental burnout. It might be mental. They need a rest, and or physical. So that's really cool. We'll start putting a bow on this one. Anything else coming into this? And I want you to give out the book and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But before we do that, anything else that you wanted to create awareness of?
I think for the young athlete, I think I want them to understand that they are unique, their needs are unique, and through education, they can start understanding what they need, and they can have autonomy over that. Not to hesitate to have the conversation with their coaches, with their parents around that. For coaches, and for parents, I want there to be an awareness around that a real impact can be made at this age. And if the messaging is consistent, and open, that can also have a huge impact on the young athlete. And for the parent, it's I might be projecting a little bit, just remembering, how things were in our house when we were bringing up our daughter. But have a little grace for yourself. But planning is everything, and but with the planning, like, don't take it all on yourself. Involve your young athlete, because that's a time for you to connect. It's a time for the athlete to learn, start gaining some of that autonomy. And so I think the whole, it's a community, right? Where we want to foster healthy sport communities. And so don't feel like you're in a silo. Work together.
I love that. That's a great vision. A great thing to work towards, healthy sport communities. That's really cool. Awesome. So how can, tell us a little bit more about your book? We didn't get into that, but about the book, how to get it, when it's popping out, all that kind of let's go book diving here.
So the title of the book is The Young Runner's Guide to Nutrition. And I wrote it to the young runner, the first 4 chapters. But it's, I believe other sports can also connect with a lot of the principles that are in there. And even though some of the specifics around strategic fueling might be specific to the runner, I think that it could give another type of athlete an idea of what they need to research or do to find out those answers for themselves. And then I also wrote a chapter for the coach. How do you integrate nutrition education into your program? So tips for doing that. And I do have a nutrition curriculum that's going to be coming out in March that can be used in conjunction with the book. And then there's a chapter for parents, starting some of these, conversations around nutrition, how to meal plan, ideas for just, like keeping a cooler in your car for carpool with healthy snacks for the kids. And then if I am meal planning, how does, here's a sample week. How does this all come together? And then there are 50 recipes in the last chapter. So they're understanding why they need certain nutrients, macronutrients, micronutrients. They're learning where they find those nutrients in foods, and then they have practical application for putting that in play.
Awesome. Sounds fantastic. How do you know yet where to go? Is it going to be on Amazon? Where can they find it? A website?
It's on Amazon. It's also, if you go to, if you Google Young Runner's Guide to Nutrition, it's going to pop up. Simon and Schuster. If you go there, they have all the places listed where the book can be purchased.
Really, really great. Well, congratulations on the book. That's awesome.
Thank you. That's another conversation we could have. Is I'd love to hear about your process of writing your book.
Well, it sounds similar to ours. I won't get into it too much, but it kind of came up around COVID, the pandemic as well, like different thoughts, and it sounds kind of similar to where you went with it. But we won't bore the listeners with that. How about like social media stuff, following you?
So my website is p3running.com. And Instagram is P3 Running Coach or MJ Pettinger. And then Facebook is also P3 Running.
Love it. Thanks for that. Well, Michele, thanks so much for being on here. I think it was awesome. And again, like a little bit different. I think obviously the nutrition piece is huge. So it was cool having a different perspective and having you on talking about that. So I really, really appreciate you being here. Best of luck with the book. I got a copy coming in the mail, I understand. So I'm excited to dig into it. Yeah, thanks again for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And I really appreciated the connection between the nutrition and the mental aspect and incorporating that into the body scan. I think that's fabulous. So
Awesome.
thank
Well, glad I brought something to the podcast. That's great. Good. Thank you. All right, we'll wrap this up. You'll just hang on the line here for 1 second. This thing takes like 2 seconds to upload, and then I'll cut you loose. Thanks again for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Travis. Bye. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to like, follow, and especially share the podcast. If you want more information on strategies that you can use to help optimize your son or daughter's athletic experience, please check out my book, Parenting Athletic Kids. It's available on Amazon. Thanks again, and we'll be back with another podcast really soon.